Okay. Good morning, everybody. It is time for another round of the Astro-Babble. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. And I apologize for any noise in the background. Until just a minute ago, there was a car alarm going, and we have multiple fun noises. Good morning, Heal Stronger on Instagram. Good morning, everybody. So we are here again with another round of Astro-Babble. We have 8 charts, which the followers of my pages have lovingly donated. If you have donated, please remember that the list is very, very long, and it's all based on when you submitted your birth dates, places, and times. But I will get to you, and I will message you the morning your charts are featured. So we have these charts, and these are all mini readings, 7 to 8 minutes-ish. If you would like to be a part of the live stream, just send in your birth date, place, and exact birth time to me via private message. If you would like to learn more about astrology or maybe work one-on-one in a consultation format, just visit my website, scorpiorisingastrology.com. So let's go ahead and pop open some fizzy water, take a quick sip, and we will get to it, shall we? So we're going to start with John. Good morning, John. How you doing, good sir? Okay, John. Oh, this is fun. John, wow. Okay. Hitting me hard this morning. So we've got a Pisces ascendant at 0-0. At 0-0, ladies and gentlemen. This is what gives me as an astrologer nightmares, because if we are not 100% exact on that birth time, like literally 100% exact at 8:40 a.m. on the dot, this reading is totally void. And that's the curse of astrology, is it is time-based. So we can't do an accurate reading without that time. So we're going to use the Pisces ascendant, but just know that if John was born at 8:35 instead of 8:40, the chart would look completely different. So we're going to trust that the time is correct, but please know that there is heavy stipulation on this chart specifically. Again, if this Pisces ascendant is correct, then we have Mars in Pisces as well as Jupiter in Pisces and the North Node all in the first house. There's a large focus this time around on developing a sense of self and developing a personality. However, we also have this Sun in Aquarius, which is in the 12th house of hidden enemies. So we have this compromised sense of self-esteem, which tends to disassociate, which tends to be self-isolating, which tends to be very much about kind of watching the woes of the world from the mountaintop on high or down below, as opposed to the actual kind of interaction with the world. Ooh, there's a fly in my room. Goodness, this morning is trying me. Okay. However, that Pisces ascendant, as well as the Scorpio moon, has some really interesting water energy in John's chart. Having the ascendant as well as the moon both in water signs really brings forward that water element. A Scorpio moon is naturally going to be rather sensitive, rather intuitive, going to be a lunar placement that really emphasizes the moon's receptive qualities. But there is this kind of coldness to the Scorpio moon, which is exacerbated by the Aquarius sun in the 12th. So this doubling down on distance would be a good way to think about it. And we really need to make sure that John leans on this Pisces ascendant in order to help him empathize and connect, because sometimes it's difficult for John to really connect with other people because he is so sensitive, because he is so tapped in. There's this easy to overwhelm side of John's chart that I think needs to be respected. Let's see, what else are we thinking about? Really interesting with John's chart in terms of career stuff, because we have the Sun in Aquarius ruling the 6th house of work, but Pluto in Leo is in the 6th house, and this is somebody who's naturally attracted to more chaotic more chaotic energy in the workplace. Definitely somebody who's gravitated towards authority and particularly healing that authority. The sun in the 12th ruling the 6th really demeans the self in the workplace, which is not necessarily a kind of setup that I like to see, but it's very much bowing to superiors is a good way to say it. Now, Pluto is one of those planets that will mature halfway through the life and start to bring ease and retirement is a good way to say it. But in the short term, pre-50, there is this idea of the workplace smothering or suppressing or exacerbating this Aquarius sun in the 12th and really pushing John into situations that are both healing and isolating, but also terribly uncomfortable. So that's some of the work get up. We do have, John being recognized over time for being just a stand-up individual with this Jupiter in Pisces so well placed in the first house, ruling the 10th house of success. I think despite all of the external struggle that John will experience in the workplace, he will be recognized for his ability to overcome, as well as his just natural kind of personal demeanor. He's not best in show, but does win kind of miscongeniality in this process, the one who is most favored or most liked, not necessarily the one who performs the best, because again we have authority issues and there's this kind of ego suppression that's happening, but we do have success despite that. There's a lot of focus about money in the life. Money is something that John identifies with very, very heavily, to the point where we would need to watch the bank account. If that ego or self-esteem starts to get low, one of the best things that John can do is implement a saving practice. He tends to associate with friends who are very hard-headed. This Mercury in Capricorn in the 11th, that's a fun mix. It really helps to drain a lot of the emotional pressure out of John's interactions, because he does have that double water sign and that kind of isolative tendency. Having somebody who's very cold, very gruff, very driven as a friend will also help to ease and also elevate some of those placements that are not necessarily ideal in the chart. We tend to pick friends that complement us, and John is somebody who just has done that very, very well. Let's see. We do have interesting stuff in the children department. Uranus in Cancer retrograde in the 5th. Being ruled by the moon in Scorpio in the 9th. This is really interesting. I've seen this once before, and it's been in a client who actually had a child that they did not know about. That Uranus in Cancer, that unpredictability of that mothering energy being ruled by moon in Scorpio in the 9th, that hidden foreign energy in the 9th house ruling that 5th, like the idea of halfway through life you realize, oh, you're actually my child. That kind of experience in John's chart is always fascinating to see, and or adopting children. Whenever we see the ruler of the 5th house of children in the 9th house of travel and foreigners, the idea of bringing in a child from overseas. Let's see. What else do we want to talk about in John's chart? No, I think that's pretty much about it. I think that we have a lot of really good relationship dynamics in the chart, but the issue is that work dynamic. That's probably the toughest part of the chart. So if John can really understand that, his daily tasks, despite being extremely soul-crushing, are through their conflict making him a better person, and then he can sink into some of the watery aspects and allow his friends to bolster him up and exercise some of his more hidden talents. That's really where John's chart shines. Cool. Alrighty. Bob, I'm going to delete your comment. Please do not submit your birth information in the comments. Good morning, Alex. Good morning, Heather. Good morning, everybody on Instagram. Aaron, everybody who's joining, thank you so much. If you would like to be a part of the live stream, private message me your birth details. Do not post those publicly. I would hate for somebody to get a hold of that information. Okay, let's talk about Bell. So Bell was born at 8 a.m. in Surabaya, which is Indonesia territory. This was really interesting. This individual was born actually in the jungle, and so my Astro software, we had to poke around a couple places to find someplace near that birthplace that was actually registering on the map. So that's always super fun. Interesting. I can see why I'm supposed to read for you at this time. I really can. And we also have, okay, ladies and gentlemen of the live stream jury, I present to you this case. We just had a 0 degrees Pisces ascendant, and if you have any doubt whatsoever that all of these readings are synchronistic, I present to you Bell's chart, which has a 0 degrees Pisces moon, right after we had a 0 degrees Pisces ascendant. And Bell's sun is also in the 12th house. It's in Libra instead of Aquarius, but still a sun in the 12th house. Like, you can't make this stuff up. So, anyway. So we have Scorpio ascendant, woo, with Pluto and Scorpio, woo, in the 1st house, woo. So Bell, one of the things that you need to understand about who you are is, oh, goodness, and you have Mars and Aries in the 6th, just like me. Oh, that's fun. So we have a lot in common, you and I. First and foremost, the idea of having this dark side, having this side that is occulty, supernatural, overly empathetic, very hypersensitive, detective-oriented, somebody who's constantly trying to get to the truth of things, and to have the ruler of your chart in Aries in the 6th house of work does make you a little bit of a workaholic, does make you somebody who finds relaxation rather tedious and unnecessary, and that's something that you're going to have to live with. That need to be hyper productive will always be kind of part of the journey for you. But it is that a lot of people will focus on the sun sign, and you have the sun in Libra, but your Scorpio ascendant with Pluto and Scorpio in the 1st, ruled by Mars and Aries, like, that's a pretty powerful placement, and that's something that I would encourage you to research a little bit more than your sun in Libra, because those are two very different energies. In fact, the sun in Libra in the 12th talks about you having low self-esteem, a low ego, where we would need to specifically bolster you up and make sure that you're surrounded by people, places, things who are able to remind you of your value, your worth, your light. When we think of the sun as a luminary, something that literally brings light to the chart, and you sticking it in the 12th house, which is notoriously kind of where the lights go out, and you already have all this Scorpio energy brewing in your chart, there's this idea of you specifically loving to thrive in the shadows, and I think that that's a beautiful place for you to be. I think that your work ethic is really strong, and you know how to fight the monsters that are in that space. I would just encourage you to understand that not everybody will understand that. It's a very mysterious placement, and it puts a lot of people off guard, but your perceptions are sharp as a tack, my friend, and I'm very, very happy to coach you through that placement. Especially with your Pisces moon. A 0 degree Pisces moon, again, makes you a double water sign, which is, again, kind of contra to the sun in Libra. The sun in Libra is the waffling side of you. It's the side of you that is very uncertain, even more so unsure, very prone to analysis paralysis with the sun in Libra in the 12th. But, you have this Scorpio ascendant, this moon in Pisces, where, you're super sensitive, very intuitive, also very artistic and spiritual. This moon in Pisces, as well as North Node in Pisces in the 5th, really speaks towards you tapping into a lot of your creativity this time around. I really would like to see you investigate art. I would really like to see you investigate spiritual expression of creative practice. I would really like to see you potentially even selling your art and or like creating a little Etsy page, because that moon and North Node in Pisces in the 5th house of creativity is being ruled by Jupiter in Gemini in the 8th. I think that you could also specialize in many different forms of art, but the idea of your 5th house of creativity having the ruler of that house in the 8th house of business does give you a leg up in the creative retail kind of department. Oh yes, and the money that would come from that is actually very good. It will be sporadic, and it will be much better the more you hone your craft, although there will always be a certain up and down to your financial gain. We have Uranus and Sagittarius here conjoining Saturn and Sagittarius in the 2nd house of finance. So Saturn reminds us that time heals all wounds, and especially from a financial perspective, the more time you devote to a practice, the better you get at it, the more you're able to sell your work for profit based on your chart. So kind of like your financial situation and your artistic expression ripening like fine wine, and you reaping the rewards of that. But also, art, the best art comes from life experience. Yeah, so the more experience you have, the more you're able to transmute that into your artistic expression, which then creates higher value. But this Uranus and Sag really does speak towards money coming quickly and in abundance, but also leaving quickly in abundance. So kind of a phrase that I'd like you to stick inside your mind is strike while the iron is hot. Yeah, that's something that I think is really, really important for you to understand. And with a Scorpio ascendant Pisces moon, you're naturally in tune to when to strike, because those those gut feelings are actually very, very spot on for you. Friends will not always be supportive as well. I think that that's something to be aware of. Friends, having this Venus in Virgo and South Node in the 11th house of friendships, just know that your friends are not on the same path as you, right? And in some ways they might even discourage you from pursuing your dreams. I would highly recommend that you not listen to them in that department. That doesn't mean that they're bad friends, but they just don't understand your process the way that you do. So there is a fine line that you're going to need to draw between your creative work and your relationships, and really helping you to understand that, yes, there is love, and love can take many different forms, from a romantic to a friendship and everywhere in between. Somebody can love you but still tell you that you're not good enough, and that's a dynamic that you're going to need to learn how to navigate specifically. It doesn't mean that they love you any less, but they just don't understand your process, and they don't understand what you're doing. Frankly, part of it is because you're just acting on raw intuition, and they don't have that same vibe. But then another part of it is, they don't see it the way you see it, and that's okay. Yeah. All right. So that's Belle's chart. Thank you so much for jumping on jumping on the live stream. We are on chart number 3. Let's take a peek. So we have Chantal's chart. Chantal, we have born at 1:42 p.m. in Houston. So she's got a Gemini ascendant with Jupiter in Gemini retrograde. Jupiter in Gemini retrograde was also present in the last chart. So funny how they overlap. But in this chart, we actually have an air stellium. We have Mercury, the Moon, the Sun, as well as Venus, all in Aquarius up in the 9th. That's very interesting, including, that does include the chart ruler, this Mercury ruling the ascendant in Gemini. So immediately when we put the ruler of the chart in the 9th house, this is somebody who has a very strong attachment to the idea of travel, foreign culture, higher learning, spirituality. Y'all always like it when I say this, but it's somebody who tends to be cultured like Greek yogurt. And that's very much the 9th house. The 9th house is the part of the chart that we go to become worldly. And you've put this stellium here, Chantal, which really, in an air sign, so the idea of you communicating internationally, I'd really like to see you study foreign language, I'd really like to see you do some really amazing things with that. And even as I'm looking, like your career houses as well are connected to this ninth house too via rulership. The moon in Aquarius is ruling your Mars in Cancer in the second. Financial gain will always be a little bit tricky, but again, if you're able to tie it into the ninth house of travel, foreigners, higher education, spirituality, those topics, those are going to be the biggest money makers for you. I just really enjoy seeing the synergy between, as well as the 21 degree ascendant in Gemini making a trine to Venus at 21 degrees in Aquarius. Like, it's just really beautiful for me. But you have put these retrograde planets in your chart. You've put Saturn and Mars, both retrograde, the two malefics, in signs that they don't necessarily enjoy. Mars is in the worst possible place, in Cancer retrograde, the sign of his detriment and going backwards. Saturn is also in fall in Leo, retrograde in the third house of communication. And I think that one of the struggles of your life, Chantal, is actually putting words to what's in your head and in your heart. I think that communication might be something that you actually need to study because it is naturally difficult for you. And that could be one of the life lessons that you would... Yeah, even with Jupiter retrograde in the first house of self, like, you have all of this air energy, but this air energy is connected to planets that are specifically going backwards in the chart. So all of this air, all of this communication, all of this intelligence, all of this intellect is having a hard time manifesting. And if you were to study something like language, I think you'd be able to unpack that a lot more. But specifically, I think, just from a remediation standpoint, we automatically need to get a Mercury altar in your home like yesterday, because not only Mercury is the ruler of your chart, but because I'm seeing all of this connection to communications in your chart, and those communications being difficult at first, but ultimately being the field and the essence of what you're here to do. Even your North Node is in Libra in the fifth house of creativity. I'm just really pleased with it, for sure. I think it's amazing. Uranus in Scorpio, being ruled by that Mars in Cancer, it's back to that idea of unpredictability when it comes to work and finances. Work might be a little bit trickier. It might be a little bit more hidden from view. You might do things that are very secretive for work, things like working for, like with the travel foreign cultures, like working for an embassy perspective, or working with people who are constantly, unpredictable, but also secretive. There's the Scorpio energy, the Uranus energy in your sixth house of work. So we would need to unpack that a little bit. Absolutely lovely that you've chosen Neptune in Sagittarius in the seventh house for your partnerships. I think that's a beautiful match. Somebody who's equally interested in fantasy and travel and the ideal and seeing new places and expanding their horizons. Also somebody who tends to get a little bit lost in their own thoughts. I think that, that's an energy that you can definitely empathize with. I enjoy that. I enjoy that partnership for you. We're specifically looking for that Sagittarius sun, moon, rising, any combination of those to really scratch the itch of your chart from a love perspective. But again, the idea of friendships not necessarily being as supportive as you would like. There is that South Node in Aries in the 11th house, ruled by that detrimental Mars in the second. I think that, it's very easy for you to attempt to give resources to friends, money, time, attention, but they always seem to let you down, and that's really where throwing yourself into your work, throwing yourself into your creativity, your studies, that's going to be really where your chart shines the most. Perfect. So that is Chantal's chart. Good morning, Amanda. Good morning, everybody who's jumping on. Thank you so much for watching. Oh, Sue with Zuzu's Healing Arts, lovely crystal shop. You can order from them online, just in case you were craving some rocks. Love Zuzu's. And one of my friends named Zoo is actually up in the queue, so I was thinking about you, Sue, this morning. Sue and Zoo. Okay, so we have Rachel as chart number 4 in the chart. Let's take a peek. So 7:40 a.m. in Silvis. Oh, well, this is interesting. This is very interesting. So we have Pluto in Libra, Sun in Libra, and Ascendant in Libra in the first house. This is a chart that's going to take a lot more work to develop. When I say that, anytime that we put Pluto in the first house, regardless of its sign, there's somebody who needs to really understand that life won't begin until halfway through the life, around 50. And the best way I can describe this is, I have Pluto in the first house, and I said this to one of my friends a while back. I said, you know, I really don't think I'm going to peak until 50. And they looked at me and they were like, what? Why would you say something like that? And I'm like, I don't know, I've just kind of always felt that way. And they're like, but your best years are like in your 30s and 40s. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. I think that I'm really going to do my best work once I get all the young stuff out of my system. And that's something that we see with Pluto in the first house, is the identity takes a little bit longer to mature. That sense of power that Pluto is able to cultivate needs time to grow and mature. So that's something to look forward to, is power being accessible halfway through the life that's not necessarily accessible at the beginning of life. We do have some really nice charisma in the chart. I love to see a Libra ascendant because it puts this coat of sugar around the aura, and I really like that. Anybody with a Libra ascendant, but especially Libra ascendant sun, there's a sense of beauty to the face. There's a natural Venusian quality to the energy. I think that's just it's such a You have charisma in the chart because the sun is ruling this Jupiter Leo in the 11th of friendships. Like, you're very good at talking with crowds and being that energetic person and weaving stories and fantasy and stuff like that. But the idea of you just having this natural Libran quality, this grace about you, like even when you trip, like people look at you and they're like, oh my gosh, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Like that's what we're talking about with this sun and ascendant in Libra. And we also have a moon in Taurus, so Venus, but your Venus is in a terrible spot. Oh, and it is opposing the moon. Oh, Lord, and it is stationed. Rachel, my darling, how the chart has turned. Okay, we have some stuff. We have some stuff. We have some stuff, and it's all about money, girlfriend. So we have this Mercury, Scorpio, Uranus in Scorpio, Mars in Scorpio, Venus in Scorpio. Venus is stationed opposing the moon directly. The moon is in Taurus in the 8th at 22 degrees, both of them. By degree, they are opposing. That's sticky. That's very sticky, darling. So to put the ruler of your chart in the second house means that money is going to be a theme of the life. You understanding your boundaries of time, resource, as well as physical cash flow. That's something that is just going to need to be top priority, right? You do have Mars in Scorpio here, which is a nice remediation, but it does mean that, you know, the idea of money as power needs to be understood. Money is a neutral force. Yeah, it's not good or bad. It can be used either way. But at the same time, that neutral force can be used very easily for ill purpose. And it's also easy for you to forget about money, because money isn't necessarily an easy thing for you to comprehend. It's a little bit too secretive. Yeah. Having a Mercury in Scorpio in the second as well, the thoughts tend to turn dark rather quickly when money is involved. But again, Scorpio thrives when there is sinister plotting afoot, and when the game can be played, often from an unfair advantage due to perception. So I would really encourage you to study finance. I would really encourage you, especially because that Mercury in Scorpio is ruling the 9th of higher education, I think you getting into the financial field would be excellent. Despite Mercury being, Venus being compromised, you would do well in your own business, I think that it would be difficult, but it would give you the lessons that you need to learn this time around. Your natural charisma would bring support regardless, and even if something doesn't work out financially, it still pays you back in terms of life experience. So I think that that's another key lesson when we look at the second house, is value takes many, many different shapes and forms, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be currency. And that's a big lesson that I'm seeing here in the chart. We also have some really intense healing work that needs to be done, Rachel, especially when it comes to your control issues. And those control issues, by the way, really derive from the Venus and Scorpio ruling the chart. I think that's where that comes from. We have Saturn in Virgo in the 12th, as well as the North Node in Virgo in the 12th. The idea of organizing and controlling the unpredictable. Yeah, that's going to be a big thing throughout the life. And that's another part of money. Like, money comes and goes. There are some things that you can do to control it, like look for a better job, increase your education. You can start to use saving protocols. You can invest. You can do all these things. But at the end of the day, something like COVID happens, something that's out of your control, and maybe you work from home. Maybe you get laid off. Maybe you have to work with the ebbs and flows in the cards that you were given. And these control issues with Saturn and Virgo in the 12th, I think that's something that can be unpacked relatively easily, because you can also learn to control the things you can control, as opposed to just melting into a puddle of goo every time something goes wrong. But Scorpio is notoriously able to do that, and I think Pluto and Venus being in slight mutual reception, because Pluto is the secondary ruler of Scorpio, like there is this exchange that I think you get it, but I think the ego and the conscious mind tend to fight you a little bit on the process. Cool. Okay, Rachel. Lev. So we have Fran. Good morning, everybody who's jumping on. So we're halfway through the charts. We're at chart number 4. How are we doing on time? We're doing all right on time. Just for all of you who are watching, if you would like to submit your information to the live stream, I just need your birth date, birthplace, and exact birth time. I do need that exact birth time. If you don't have it, look it up, get it on a birth certificate, ask a family member. Please be sure. I've had so many of you submit your birth time and you're like, whoops, it was the wrong time. I'm like, sorry. That's why the reading didn't make sense, and that's part of the deal. Also, if you would like to work one-on-one, or if you would like to learn astrology, you can go to my website, scorpiorisingastrology.com. Okay, let's take a peek at Zoo's chart. Zoo, my darling. So we have a 2:34 a.m. birth time in Norwalk. Let's take a peek. Cancer ascendant right off the bat, ruled by a moon in Aquarius in the 8th house of business. Death, taxes, entrepreneurship, all those things. Having a Cancer ascendant and then a moon in Aquarius in the 8th does give an overprotective nature to the chart. This is somebody who, Cancer is that sign that puts the mother in smother, and there is a compassion to that. But the Aquarius is that sign that tends to be apathetic and socially distant, even prior to social distancing. It tends to prefer the lofty winds and the higher roads, as opposed to mingling with the peasants. And Aquarius has that natural kind of genius quality that's above it all. And having that Cancer ascendant and the moon in Aquarius in the 8th really does say, I really don't get you. I love you, but I don't get you. And because of that, I find a very hard time relating to you. I can relate to you because I'm a robot that is able to work with their Cancerian programming in order to understand what makes you up. But at the end of the day, I don't understand you. That's the energy where we see that love of Cancer paired with a very distant Aquarius moon in the 8th. But putting the moon in the 8th does give you a natural proclivity to the 8th house topics of death, taxes, estates, working with other people's money, as well as entrepreneurship, some mediumship qualities too. Aquarius is one of those telepathic signs. Okay, then we have, the star of the chart is really this Leo stellium. So we have Mercury in Leo, Venus in Leo, Sun in Leo, Mars in Leo, all in the second house of finance. This is a very bright financial house, and also having the Sun here in the second house, we have major stuff from a wealth perspective. However, both Venus and Mars are combust. For those of you who aren't familiar with that term, combustion is a traditional, more Hellenistic term when planets are within 7.5 degrees on either side of the sun. The sun's light kind of eclipses those planets, and they cannot be visually seen in the sky. And because of that, they are thought to be in detriment. Now, the sun is ruling those planets because it is in Leo, but the idea of gender specifically, because we're dealing with Venus and Mars, this is a very core fundamental idea of non-binary gender roles in the chart, because Venus and Mars, the masculine feminine aspects of the chart, are literally eclipsed by the sun. And it's one of those things of like, what are my pronouns? None of your business. I am a Leo. That is how I identify. You know, I am not Venusian. I am not Martian. I am Leo, and that ego is very, very powerful in that financial house. And I think paired with that Aquarius ascendant, there's a little bit of a godlike archetype that's coming forward with that overpowered sun eclipsing some planets that are a little bit more human. Then we have this Mercury in Leo, and a lot of the mental state is also very dramatic, very flamboyant, very creative, which I enjoy. But again, this Leo sun is just a little bit tripping. He's tripping. He's got a little bit too much power in the second house of finance, and I think that might be eclipsing some of the natural rulerships in the charts, like friendships, but also, let's see. The house of children is eclipsed because the Mars is in detriment, and success to a certain degree. We do have this Jupiter in Aries and this North Node in Aries. The purpose of this chart is to become successful. However, the success is going to be a lot of hard work, and the success is going to be, this Jupiter in Aries is very much about more work equals more success, and that's not always the case. This is a chart that is not necessarily prone to working smart. It is a chart that's prone to working exceptionally hard. And I think one of the lessons is to really understand how effortless creation works, and to not waste that radiant energy on tasks that are below the standard of this chart's ego. We do have Saturn and Uranus both in Sag, both retrograde in the 6th. That's a very tricky placement. This is something that I've seen before in a couple people where odd jobs are definitely something that this chart does very, very well. Uranus is that sense of unpredictability. Saturn is that sense of determination and that kind of Mr. Fix-It when it comes to Sagittarius. Both are retrograde, ruled by this Jupiter in Aries. Somebody who's able to come into a situation, identify what's wrong, fix it real quick, and then get out before they start, yelling and screaming at people because they're doing things wrong all the time and breaking the work that they were hired to fix. That's the ultimate frustration of that work placement. So as long as we understand and respect that you doing a job does not mean that the job is successful. Yeah, you doing a job means paycheck. That's different than you actually doing something that you can bank on. That's often where your Aquarius moon needs to kick in and say, hey, I'm doing this thing for me on the side that I'm passionate about, and then I'm collecting my paycheck elsewhere, because I know that the people with the money don't necessarily care about the quality of the work as much. They really just want to make sure that I'm doing the job they assigned, and they're going to break it regardless, so why try? And that's kind of part of the chart dynamic. Interesting. So we have in the relationship house this Neptune in Capricorn retrograde in the 7th. Oh yeah, and Jupiter and Sag ruling that from the 6th, the idea of going into business with a partner, working with a partner, but also, Neptune and Capricorn is notorious for being the wet blanket, and having somebody in your life that's constantly fulfilling that role, I think is needed, because it keeps the ego in check. This fiery sun blotting out the Venus and Mars really needs somebody to come in and say, okay, enough with the fire, and to almost uber rationalize the idea of, okay, now we need to take it easy, now we need to not do this, and now we need to make sure that you don't fight somebody with this massive ego, and here's why. And somebody who can rationally, and in some ways falsely, but rationally tone down the heat of this chart, and also activate a lot of those fantastical feelings that the Jupiter and Sag kind of placements really start to open up in the chart over time. Really nice. Cool. Okay. Thank you, Zoo. Love you. Okay. Whee! Oh goodness, y'all are killing me with these comments. Okay. So let's go to our next chart. So we have Kari, born at 1:35 p.m. in Maynard. Whoa. Okay. Why not just put all your planets in Aquarius? So we have a moon in Gemini, very close to the ascendant in Gemini, in the first house of self, and then we have Saturn, Mercury retrograde, Mars, South Node, Jupiter, Sun, and Venus, all in Aquarius in the 9th house. So we actually looked at a very similar chart earlier. The idea of putting the ruler of the chart in the 9th house does give this person the natural inclination to be interested in foreigners, travel, higher education, spirituality, those 9th house topics. Mercury retrograde ruling the chart, though, is tricky, is very tricky. It again puts a damper on communication stuff. This is a very different flavor. You've put all of your eggs in this basket, my dear, and I'm not really sure how I feel about it. You've decided to hit this area of your life so hard, but then you put the ruler of your chart retrograde to slow you down. You've also put Saturn here, and Saturn ruling all of this 9th house activity to, again, slow you down. And you put the South Node here to, again, slow you down. Like you've decided, I'm going to go all in on this house, this 9th house of travel, foreigners, higher education, spirituality. But then I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that it doesn't get out of control. And then to put the direction of the chart in the 3rd house of writing, teaching, communication, where we have Uranus and Leo retrograde, another retrograde planet. It's just, I'm struggling to see how and why this would be useful to you. And this is really interesting because these charts are cold. Like, I'm not looking at them beforehand, and sometimes it takes me a little bit to understand what the chart is actually trying to say. To put so much air in the chart, but then to put the brakes on the air, it's like you're trying to ground the ungroundable. Like you're trying to manifest things on such a level that's really, it has the potential to be really fabulous if you're able to execute it. It's just you've chosen a very tricky thing to execute. And a lot of your success is going to be whether or not you truly know the ins and outs and ups and downs of anything that you study, especially if it comes to you becoming a writer, which is very much a part of your chart. Working in education, very much a part of your chart. Weaving stories, very much a part of your chart. But the Uranus and Leo in the 3rd house and the North Node here really does say, you're here to share, you're here to teach, you're here to spread your butter on other people's toast, is a good way to say it. Yeah. And to do this in a very airy way, a very Leo way, very dramatic, very charismatic, very much about sharing ideas in innovative and in some ways genius ways. Making things accessible, especially things that are foreign, making foreign things accessible in a way that other people wouldn't even think of. However, again, you've decided to put so many things in your chart in your way, and we need to remediate these things. Specifically, Jupiter and Venus, the two benefics, are in combustion in your chart. They're each 4 degrees away from the sun, so they're kind of burnt up by the sun. So the positive influences in your 9th house, they're not as easy to see. And I'm wondering why you chose to make it so hard. You made yourself so versatile, so skilled, so able to learn, so willing to learn, so willing to grow, so willing to understand, to comprehend, and then you told yourself that you would pass on this comprehension to the next generation. But then you've made it exceedingly difficult. And I'm not sure why you did that to yourself. Yeah. Even this Neptune and Scorpio in the 6th house, like the idea of you potentially working in fields that are secretive, prone to addiction issues. Neptune tends to make things fantasy-oriented. There being miscommunications in the workplace all the time, but you navigating a world that is notoriously difficult. And it's just impressive how you've decided to be so pinpoint accurate all of the time, but then intentionally stack the deck against yourself so that you would be forced to develop this uniqueness. I mean, honestly, I'm just really impressed with all of this air energy, but the idea of you getting in your own way to serve your purpose, like, this is the kind of chart that we need to understand. We choose these charts for a reason. And in this case specifically, choosing to put certain planets in detriment and exalt others, like exalting this Saturn in Aquarius in the 9th, really gives you that hard-headedness, that stubbornness, but also that genius of Aquarius. But then all of the soft aspects, the easy aspects, the fun aspects of Venus and Jupiter are blotted out by the sun. And I think, yeah, because then we have this partner of yours who comes along just tra-la-la, this kind of fun, fiery, spunky energy, who's really trying to introduce you to this concept of fun and ease, but also helping you to be your creative self. Like, it's fascinating to me, but that's really all your chart is about, is kind of mastery this go around. And I'm not really sure what else to say about it, because it is what it is. And that's probably the phrase that kind of encapsulates your chart the most, is you're just so hyper focused on what is, and mastering that, and then telling people what is, and that being the fundamental purpose of your chart. Excellent. So that is Kari's chart, and then we'll move on to Randall's chart. Let's take a peek. Oh, this is fun. So Randall has Scorpio ascendant with Neptune and Scorpio retrograde in the 1st house of self. This is somebody who naturally is prone to fantasy, is prone to hypersensitivity, but also we need to be very careful, Randall, from a medical perspective. I don't like to see Neptune in Scorpio on the 1st. It makes you very, very sensitive to all chemicals. Your body just cannot process them well. That includes things like alcohol and caffeine. Yeah, your body is prone to get used to them a little bit too quickly, but also, like, this is something that we see in people who potentially would be candidates for addiction issues. But also, because of that hypersensitivity, you need, like, my friends and my clients who have the same placement, I would say you need like 1/4 of the aspirin in order to feel the effect of it, and that's very much the hypersensitivity of that Neptune conjunct Scorpio ascendant. You've put Venus and Taurus in the 7th, which I commend you for. That's a beautiful placement for Venus. The love of love. Yeah. And this Mercury in Taurus retrograde in the 7th, you know, you're here to meet a partner who is notoriously stubborn. Absolutely notorious. So hard-headed. So fixed. You know, Mercury is that planet of the mind. Taurus is that planet, that fixed earth element that's very much, this is the way it is, there is no other way, this is the most efficient, we're doing it my way, and you can leave otherwise. But to also have that retrograde in the 7th house of relationships, that's kind of the essence of your partner, that airy planet in that earthy sign that's super fixed and retrograde. But Venus in Taurus is really looking for somebody who's affectionate, who's touchy, who's feely, who gets that Scorpio side of you, and who can actually help you to melt a little bit and get some of that colder Scorpio energy to warm up. And you do have this nice moon in Leo conjoin the midheaven in the 10th. Oh, such an entrepreneur. Such an entrepreneur. Yeah, I love it. The sun in Gemini in the 8th, ruling the moon in Leo in the 10th. Yeah, there's going into business. There's again, we see this Jupiter in Aries. This time it's in the 6th. That workaholic energy coming through. Again, I would remind you, Randall, especially with your Scorpio rising, you should know this. Working hard is not the same as working smart, and just because you work hard does not mean you are doing a better job. Yeah? So, just something to be aware of. The family situation was really interesting. This exalted Saturn in Libra, ruled by Mercury in Taurus. It wouldn't surprise me if your spouse or your relationships have a common thread of being introduced to you via family. But also the idea of your family dynamic growing up being very stern, yeah, but fair, yeah, not easy, but fair. Fair is the best way to describe it. Saturn is often known for restriction, punishment, the idea of being not very lovely, but in Libra he is exalted, and so we find that there is a niceness to this Saturn in the 4th house of family, but still, like, not the easiest way to grow up with that overlord energy in the family dynamic. Let's see. The career success thing, like, I get it. I get why you're so eager to prove yourself and why you think it's so important that you establish your own identity in something that is uniquely yours. Like, I understand that. But again, we need to recognize that your goal this time around is not necessarily to be the showboat. Yeah? It's a piece of you, but there is a fine line between ego and success. Yeah, and the two can be separated. You don't need to have a massive ego in order to be successful. You don't need to be over-identifying with your work and your job in order to be successful. Sometimes it's just about learning. Sometimes it's just about the experiences that you get along the way. Sometimes it's about the spiritual truths that you uncover, the good that you do in the world, that, you know, privilege can really allow you to do when you're good at what you do and when you work hard at what you do, but the work itself and the success itself isn't the end goal. This North Node in Cancer in the 9th is very much about you becoming worldly because of your work, not necessarily you gaining success or fame as being the end result. That very may well happen, but we need to consider the deeper lessons here. Cool. Okay. Yes, Randall. Thank you for donating your chart to science. Okay, we've got one more chart, And we're on time. Excellent. So let's talk about Jenny. So Jenny was born 11:29 p.m. in Billings. We have a Capricorn ascendant being ruled by Saturn and Leo and Mars and Leo in the 8th. It's so funny how these charts just layer on top of each other. So we have Saturn and Leo, Mars and Leo in the 8th, and then we have another Sun in Gemini in the 6th. Yeah, Jupiter Taurus, Mercury Taurus in the 5th. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, we have complexity here in this chart. Layers upon layers upon layers of complexity. You've spread yourself out so well, Jenny. You've really embodied a lot of qualities that I think are fascinating and useful. Like your Capricorn ascendant gives you this workhorse energy that is focused, that is stubborn, that is not easy to get along with, but somebody who is very right, very true, and very focused. Especially having the ruler of your chart in the 8th house of business, like I think that's an excellent mark for an entrepreneur. But then you have this Gemini energy, this Gemini sun in the 6th house of work, health, pets. And I think that, you know, you've also understood that you can be a jack of all trades and be hyper-focused at the same time. Your talents are multiple, but they can also be channeled like a Swiss Army knife, and you can use one at a time in order to achieve your goals. That's a very valuable skill. Same thing with this moon in Virgo in the 9th. You're very good at research. Very good at research, and in fact, you find foreign cultures very interesting, especially when you're able to steal their tips and tricks of efficiency. Like your personal hero is Marie Kondo, and I'm going to say that unapologetically because that's exactly. Goodness, this fly. That's exactly kind of what your chart speaks to. That Capricorn energy, that moon in Virgo in the 9th. I would highly recommend that you, or, you know, not just Marie Kondo, but even like the Netflix documentary, Jiro Dreams of Sushi. Like that's very much your aesthetic. But we do have this North Node in Scorpio in the 11th. Yeah. What are we going to do about that? So the North Node in Scorpio in the 11th talks about the goal of your life, specifically being about earning friendships. And I say earning friendships very specifically because it's not easy for you to make friends. The ease in which you make friends is tricky because they just kind of pop up out of nowhere like ninjas. But this North Node in Scorpio really asks you to say, okay, it's one thing to go into business, it's one thing to learn, it's one thing to work hard in a variety of fields, acquire talents, and you know, make your way through the life. But it's something else to find meaningful connections along the way. It's very Wizard of Oz, where you're kind of accruing these friends along the journey. As you start to get to your goal, but you're not really sure why they're there or what they represent, but they always do represent the pieces of you, don't they? They represent who you are as a person. You tend to attract people who tend to mirror and reflect your own vices, especially. So we need to be careful. These friends of yours are tricky. They're tricky for many reasons, but that doesn't mean that they're not valuable. We just need to look underneath the surface because a lot of their values, their lessons, and what they should represent to you are non-conventional, to say the least. Let's see. Gemini, Cancer. So we have the moon in Cancer. You specifically marrying foreigner. the spouse that you are looking for with that moon in Virgo ruling the 7th house of relationships is going to be somebody who's cultured, somebody who shares a culture who is different from yours, somebody who you potentially meet overseas, but somebody who is very different from you, but also who can bring a lot of richness and value into your life. I think that's pretty much it. Yep, I think we've talked enough about this chart. Excellent. Thank you, Jenny. I appreciate you for jumping on. And yep, we're just about out of time. Thank you, everyone, for continuing to support this live stream via submitting your birth dates, places, and times, but also through sharing the video and booking consults with me and taking classes with me online. It really does mean a lot to me to share astrology with you like this in the mornings, but also to do this as a big part of my profession. If you would like to be in the live stream, just private message me your birth date, place, and time, and I'll add you to the list. The list is rather long, but please be patient. If you would like to learn astrology or work one-on-one, just go to my website, scorpiorisingastrology.com, and we will schedule something. But in the meantime, signing off for now. We'll be back on Monday, and in the meantime, may the stars be ever in your favor.